Hey everybody, I'm Joe and this is Blender 2.8. Blender 2.8 is an absolutely fantastic and free 3D modeling program that can be used to make 3D models for 3D printing. Technically, it's a 3D animation program, but part of animation is being able to make a 3D model, and Blender has a powerful set of tools for doing that. Now, we do need to configure Blender just a little bit because by default it's set up to make worlds of a different scale than we're used to. So we're going to set that up today. Now, if you feel like you need to go back to even more basic beginning, don't worry. The previous videos to this one, it was a series called The Absolute Beginner's Guide to 3D Printing for it's the Absolute Beginner's Guide. And if you need to, you can go back to that. But if you've been following along with those videos, this is the next video in the series. But it's also a great place to start if you already know a little bit about 3D modeling and navigating a 3D space. So this is a good place for people to jump on if they feel that that previous series was going a little bit too slow. It was going very slow, but for a good reason. Now we're going to pick up the pace. Now, if you haven't installed Blender 2.8, now's a perfect time to pause the video and go do it and then come back and follow along because this is the first menu that you will see when you start up Blender 2.8. And this is just a couple of basic settings that Blender is giving you to work with. Now, I would keep everything at the default. The only thing that I would change is what the spacebar does. We don't need to worry so much about playing an animation because we're not animating, we're making static models. So instead, have the spacebar pull up the tools menu. I'll talk in a little bit about what that's about. I'm also going to change my theme to light because it looks good on YouTube videos, but then hit next. Now that menu's gone, and this is the menu that you'll see at the beginning of Blender every time you open it up. Click off of that menu, and now we're looking at the default scene. Now, this default scene isn't exactly what we need, but we'll leave it the way that it is for now and change it in just a little bit. But I want you to take a look at this cube in the middle, and I want you to take a look at the size of this cube. We can see the size in the sidebar, which we can get to by clicking here or by hitting the N key. I prefer that method, or in the upper right over here, view sidebar. Look at the dimensions of the cube. It's 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. But if we took this cube and exported it to an STL and brought that into our slicer, it would interpret this as 2 millimeters. So we need Blender to think of this cube as being 2 millimeters big so that everything lines up in an exported STL. The way that we do that is over here in the properties panel, click on the scene tab. Looks like a little cone and a circle and a little circle above it, and then open up the units collapsible there. The unit system metric, that's good, that's what we want, but we want our length to be millimeters. So hit the drop down and choose millimeters on that. Now look at our cube. It is now 2000 millimeters by 2000 by 2000. It's still 2 meters, which it's closer. It's at least expressing it in millimeters, but we want that to be 2 millimeters. So we need to change our unit scale. What Blender thinks of one as being to being a 0.001 metric unit, which means now this cube is 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. But you might have noticed when we did that that our grid disappeared. Well, it didn't disappear. It's just that the next grid line is a meter away. So we need to get that back. And the way that we do that is up here in the overlays in the upper right, click the drop down on that. It looks like two circles, one black and one hollow on top of each other. And change our grid scale to 0.001 as well. And ta-da, our grid is back. Now, one other thing that you might want to do in this sidebar over here, which we got to by hitting N or clicking that sidebar, under View, right here, these first couple ones, focal length defines how the virtual lens of the virtual camera that we are looking through into the space is set. That's fine. But the clipping, to save Blender from having to render the entire world, it will cut things off after a certain distance. Now, I I like my clipping to start a little bit closer, so I like to set that at 0.01, but I like my clipping to end far, far away. I'm going to just add another zero to that, 10,000 millimeters. Now I can make something that's 10,000 millimeters and still be able to see the end of it. I very rarely do that, but I like to have the option there. So we've set up our viewpoint, we've set up our unit, everything is working in millimeters. That's great, but this default scene is still just garbage. It's not useful to us. Let's make it useful right now. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the light source here, and I can click on it here in the 3D view, or I can click on it on the outliner, and then I'm going to hit delete. And if you do it in the outliner, you can right mouse click and hit delete, which I want you to do now for the camera. For the camera, I want you to click on it and either in the outliner right mouse click and choose delete, or just hit the delete key with your mouse over the 3D view. So the only thing we have left is the cube. Now this cube is going to become our floor. So in the outliner, I want you to double click on the word cube and type floor. Except this isn't the floor that we want. We want this floor to be at the grid level here and bigger. Now, the way to put this at the grid level is we could just move it down 1 millimeter, but I'm going to do a little trick right here. What I want you to do, and actually this will be a good time to transition over to the modeling tab. Do you see these tabs across the top? Layout, modeling, sculpting. Blender 2.8 creates a lot of really great default environments that rearranges the screens in really great ways, and you can make your own anytime you want. In fact, you can right mouse click on any of these and duplicate them and create a new one, but we don't need to. The modeling tab is great for our purposes, so just click on modeling, and now you'll see we're in edit mode. And I haven't talked about this in the absolute beginner's guide, but edit mode is where a lot of stuff happens, and it automatically selects all the points in the cube. If you want to navigate your view around like this, the middle mouse button, that scroll wheel, click and drag that to do that. But with all of these points selected, I want to move the points down in edit mode so that the top is level with the bed. So all we have to do is hit G, Z, -1, press enter. There we go. Now I want you to exit edit mode by hitting tab. It looks like our grid disappeared. So I'm going to go up to the viewpoint and change my grid scale again to 0.1 or 0.001. I didn't realize that every one of these tabs was different, or I'd have started there, but that's all right. So now we've got this cube below the build surface, but what's more important? It's below the XY plane, but what's more important is that its origin, that point that defines where everything scales up from, is still at that XY plane. Watch this. Let's open up that sidebar again, and let's edit the dimensions in here. We want the X of this to be, well, you want its X and Y to be the dimensions of your build plate, but I designed for a lot of 3D printers, so I like to make this floor 100 millimeters by 100 millimeters. 100 millimeters is a small build plate, really. It's a very small 3D printer. It's a mini 3D printer. But I like to kind of constrain myself to that most of the time so that I'm designing for the largest audience that I can. But you can set this. If you've got an Ultimaker, set it 200 by 200. If you've got a CR10, set it 300 by 300. This will kind of define your build space. I'm also, and this is the cool part, watch this, set the Z to be about 20 millimeters, and notice how it just goes straight down. It didn't go up, it didn't scale up and down, it just went straight down. That's what happened when we went into edit mode and moved everything down in edit mode. I'll talk more about that in the future. Okay, this is a pretty good floor, but one problem with this floor is it might get in the way of modeling. We might have trouble seeing objects through it. So let's change the way it's viewed here. So in this property panels, click on the object here, open up the viewpoint port display object. By the way, if you're just listening to the dulcet sounds of my voice, looks like a square with corners drawn on it. Sorry, I didn't tell you that sooner. Open up viewport display and display this object instead of displaying it as textured, which is to say we're not, this isn't a textured view, this is a solid view, but you can choose at what point it stops displaying it. We're going to display this one just as wire. You could do bounds, but since it's already a cube, there's no real difference there. Now, this object will only ever look like the outline of itself, but so we can see other objects through it just fine, no matter what mode we're in. It looks like we're in wireframe view, which if I switch to, you'll notice there's no real difference. Wireframe view, solid view, look dev view, it renders them all as a wireframe view. That's what that setting does. Well, this is, I think, a pretty good default scene. We're in our modeling tab. We've got our grid set up. We've got a floor object in there. I'm pretty happy with this default scene. So go up to File, go up to Defaults, and say Save Startup File. Okay, yeah, confirm that that's okay. And now the next time you can close and open Blender, and this will be the scene that you will see. It's a great place to start. So that's exciting. So now we've set up the units, we've got a better default scene that makes a lot more sense for what we're doing, and now it's time to start turning on some plugins. Blender comes kind of pre-installed with plugins, but they're not on to begin with because it would be overwhelming if Blender turned on everything that it could do from the very start. So we kind of want Blender to ease us into it, and that's what it does. So now we'll go up to File. Is it in File or Edit? There it is, Edit, sorry. Edit, Preferences. Now remember, it popped it into my second screen. There it is. Remember I said that we could change any of those settings that we chose on that opening menu? This is where we can change them. Now there are a lot of settings in Blender. Honestly, it could be rather overwhelming. Now, I'm going to change my resolution scale to 1.4, but I'm only going to do that so that everything is bigger for you on the view. I would recommend keeping this at 1, but if you have a very, very large monitor, you can increase that resolution scale so that everything's bigger and easier to see. But I do this for visibility. You don't have to do this. What we do want to do, and I recommend you play with this. Some people don't like to see the splash screen, so they turn that off. Some people get tired of these little tooltip pop-ups, so they turn that off. Me, I like the splash screen because it shows me what I've been working on recently and I can choose which file right there. But let's go to add-ons. This is where so many honestly, I recommend you spend some time with this menu. There's so many great things to do in here. Let's click add-ons. And add-ons is great. We can see all the add-ons that we can have here. We can search for them and choose which one. I honestly recommend you just play with all of these settings right here. But the ones that I recommend you turn on is the 3D view modifier tools. Just click on that and it will already be on. Here, take a look. Well, I didn't I guess we have to save it here before it will do it. Okay, so modifier tools, I like that. I also like there is a 3D print, so just type 3D print, and 3D print toolbox is absolutely invaluable. I recommend having that on at all times. What are some other ones that I really like? Oh, there's mesh. So do a search for mesh and turn on, no, not mesh. Would be add mesh, wouldn't it? Where is it? There's the extra objects. So let's just scroll down here. Add curve, add mesh. That's what I was looking for. Wasn't coming up. Add mesh. extra objects. I like those extra objects. There's a lot of cool things in there. Bolt Factory is actually a really useful one to have on, especially if you're going to be using 3D or Blender to make models for functional parts and you want to be able to add bolts to them. So the bolt tool is absolutely fantastic in there. What else? What else? What else? What do I like to have on all the time? Let's see, STL importing and exporting. We like that. And and again, this is another menu that I recommend you come back to every once in a while. Try to loop tools. That's one of them that I want. Mesh editing loop tools. I think that never mind. There's one more that we need the object bool tools. Okay, that I think is the last one for now. But boy, if you're ever going to do anything with modeling characters, there are there's the Rigify that I might recommend you turn on. I'm going to turn that on right now because I will use it later. All right, there we go. Our settings are all up and good to go. Now, at the bottom, those three bars, if you don't see it, click on the little tab there, but hit Save Preferences, and now everything should be good to go. We can close out of this, and then let's close and restart Blender. I'm wondering why my modifier tools aren't. There it is. When I add a modifier, I get my modifier tools there. Look at that. That's cool. It's already up and running there. All right, no problem. So now Blender is all set up. And this is everything that I do when I set up Blender. And if you're going to go forward and use and watch videos with me, you're going to want to have your Blender set up the same. Any changes that you make, anything that you do differently, I encourage you to do. I want you to make Blender yours. That preferences menu is the most powerful thing in Blender because it means if you ever feel like, Blender's not doing what I want, then fix it. Make it do what you want. But keep in mind that if you do settings differently than I do, then there's a chance that you may want to you're going to have to keep in mind those changes going forward, that if I do something in one way, you're going to have to do it in a different way. And that's fine. Take control of Blender that way. I think that that's absolutely wonderful. Well, that's it. I want to thank very much the members on my Discord, the member in particular on my Discord, whose name I've forgotten, but I will put his name in the description of this video, who put together the absolutely fantastic document that kind of guided this a little bit. And if you have a favorite plugin or a favorite setting in Blender that I didn't show you to do, then please leave it in the comments and recommend to people, hey, check this one out, do this one. I might pop in and do that myself as well. But there we go. Blender's all set up. Now let's go on next week and talk a little bit more about using this well set up Blender that we got here. As always, remember safety first because I care about you. And I'll see you next time.